Steve. I'll wait for that to happen. There we go. Okay, so I think we should start because we could be waiting and not quite knowing when people will pitch up. So a warm welcome to Rod Parks in particular, but also Matt, who's got up again very early in the morning, I think. It's towards the afternoon here, and apologies for the problems with timings on this. I'm delighted we've actually found the right time eventually on the second go, and delighted also that you're able to talk to us about this really significant topic, the notion of student achievement, the notion of records developed and held digitally, of interest in the UK context with the Higher Education Achievement Report and other developments, and clearly of interest to yourselves in the US. I had very positive feedback from a colleague from JISC, Rod, about your contribution at a recent European event, maybe Groningen.
Thank you.
So I'm really looking forward to the contribution from both of you. And I think just a bit of housekeeping. Colleagues have started to discover how to use the chat. That's great. If where we're going along you want to jot questions or issues down in that space, please do. I will keep an eye on it. If it works as it did on their first session, there will be some time at the end just to pursue some of those issues with Matt and Rod, and I will attempt to facilitate that in an inevitably clumsy but hopefully useful way, we'll see how that goes. In addition, if when we're listening rather, colleagues can keep their microphones muted, particularly if you're in an open plan space, that will be really helpful. Sometimes those environments give a lot of background noise. I just wanted to note, finally, before I hand over, that as according to some information I've got about Rod, he's the director of the Summer College. And if that's still true, just to note that today, I think summer has really got underway in the UK. So you're obviously a good omen, Rod, and I look forward to a contribution from both of you. And at that point, I'll shut up. Remember to use the chat, colleagues, and I'll hand on to Matt and Rod. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join everyone. We're recording this on Monday, May 21st. And so it feels like a time of renewed interest in a special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. So why not move from the royal family to academic records? It seems completely natural. That was my bit at an opening joke. I will introduce myself briefly, and then Rodney, you can introduce yourself. And the way we've organized our talk is I'll pretty much cover the first half and he'll cover the second half. And I think we both welcome questions in the chat as we move through so that we are able to generate them as we go, and the topic is on people's mind. But I think we'll return to the chat at the end to actually address them. And that way we'll be able to set the table fully and then come back, and we look forward to a great conversation. So my name is Matthew Paczynski. I am the CEO of Parchment, and I'll introduce Parchment briefly in a moment. I'm also have a faculty affiliation with Arizona State University, where I was on the faculty of sociology. So my academic background is in sociology of education. And before that, I co-founded the learning management system company Blackboard in 1997. So I have a background both in education technology as well as in academia. Rodney?
I'm Rod Parks. Greetings to all of you out there. I'm the registrar and director of Summer College and assistant to the provost at Elon University, where I've served for the last 5 years. And most recently, part of the ACRO-NASPA grant to expand academic records. So we've done a good bit of work to try to take a very old artifact, the transcript, and convert it to capture more of the student experience, which we will talk a little bit about today. So nice to meet all of you.
Okay, so let's move in, and I'm going to start by setting the context. So for those who are on the last webinar, I apologize if this is repetitive. For those who are new, I think it will be helpful to know that there are 3 main service providers that universities in the United States rely on to both issue electronic records as well as to receive and process those electronic records. And I mentioned the second part because that's often the interaction that U.S. institutions have with institutions abroad. They certainly send students abroad, so the issuing side, where you're the receiver, is relevant, but they receive as well. In Parchment's case, about 1 in 4 secondary school enrollments are at a high school that uses Parchment to take requests and fulfill electronically, and about 1 in 5 U.S. college enrollments in the U.S. are at institutions that use Parchment. The other two is an organization called Credentials, and then last but not least is the National Student Clearinghouse. We also work on the admissions office side to receive from those institutions, the high schools and the colleges that I just mentioned. And then we have a network of partners, including organizations like BridgeU in the United Kingdom, CHESIC in China, TrueCopy in India, relationships across the EU as well, so that they can send into these admissions offices electronically. It's not just about our own network, it's about inter-network interoperability, and we think that's a very important principle. On the issuing side, and this is the context in which we work with Elon and have the pleasure to work with Rodney, the basic idea of the category, which I think is a new category of higher education technology, namely the credential management system, is the ability to collect and aggregate as broad a learner record as possible, as comprehensive a learner record as possible, not just the courses and credits that are traditionally part of the student information system, but as well co-curricular and extracurricular information, as Rodney will discuss, competency-based mappings or assessment information, third-party assessments. As well, it can include formative information from the learning management system in addition to summative. As we build that comprehensive learner record, it then becomes a matter of templates, so to speak, to generate different types of records for different purposes. The traditional diploma, which is used very actively outside the US. In the US, it's a bit more of a symbolic document. It's the academic transcript of courses and credits. But as you'll see in Rodney's talk, the ability to also create, instead of textual type records, visual records, and instead of covering just traditional courses and credits, covering a broader set of information as well. We even have institutions that are beginning to personalize their records, so that if a student were to send a record to Accenture and to Google, they might highlight different types of courses and credits as part of that as well. So we really think we're at the beginning of a personalization and a customization and really a tailoring of the academic record, not just for the intra or inter-academic purposes of an academic record, but for employment and licensing, as well as reflective purposes as well. Those then have all of the advantages that digital can bring: electronic request, the ability to issue out through email and text mail to be claimed. We also, do need from time to time to create paper copies to print fulfill, email, social, the ability to download with Blue Ribbon PDF, receiving, tracking, and not too long from now, I'm sure, recording to the blockchain as well. On the receiving side, you sort of flip it around, and we talked about this last time as well. And I hear a little bit of background noise, so I might ask if there are folks who haven't yet muted your line, just for the benefit of the recording, if you would do so, please. So flipping it around, you have Parchment Network. You also have our unified inbox partners, and those are the different kinds of organizations that can deliver into admissions offices, and they have the ability to route and collect and process those records for different purposes. And our receiver network spans both academic organizations, but as I'll talk about in a moment, employers, licensing boards, other types of destinations who have a pattern or a practice of collecting and processing credentials as well. So I'm going to pause again. It still seems as if there's some feedback. I don't know, Steve, if you're hearing that as well. Okay. Nope, it's still there. So I'll defer to you, Steve. Do you want me to pause as we work this out, just for the benefit of the recording? or should I move on?
It comes and goes. It's not there at the moment.
We're getting a bit of an echo. This is Rob.
Yeah.
I'm seeing two mics lit up. Carol, if you're hearing me, and Gillian, if you could just mute your microphones, that would just leave Matt and Rod indeed, and me when I turn mine off. There should be a symbol towards the top of the GoToMeeting on the right-hand side, which allows you to mute your mic. Thanks, Jill. That's great.
I've got it from here, Rob. You're okay.
Great. Thank you, colleagues. I'll do the same. Steve does the same, and we're good to go.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to shift a bit now, having introduced Parchment, and move into the main topic of the day. As Rodney will describe, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think there are many motivations for what Elon has done, and institutions like Elon in the US to look to innovate their academic record. We talk, for one, about the reflective benefit of it for a student to really understand in a more comprehensive way what they've accomplished, or at an earlier stage of their academic program, what they can accomplish. But I think a very clear driver, at least in the US context, is to create a tighter link between post-secondary education and employment, between the university and the labor market. There is an increasing question being called about the cost of higher education and the impact of higher education for career outcomes. And I think there's a recognition by universities that while they point to the broad benefits of a university education, the academic record, which in many ways documents or captures or reflects that broader experience, is only capturing a narrow part of it. So there's a very active conversation around outcomes, and a big part of that conversation is around employment. And that should be no surprise in many ways. We survey students regularly, and when we ask them, what do you want to accomplish with a digital record, 71% of them say us that they want to use their academic record, tell us, excuse me, that they want to use their academic record to increase their marketability with employers. That's their number one reason for wanting a copy. And in fact, 61% say that they either show their diploma or their transcript to their employer as part of the hiring process, or enable some form of degree verification. Now that is a little surprising to me. I think that number is a bit high, but I think we can accept that for students, the record, their education is tied to that opportunity for an internship and then for that first job. And that caused us to ask a very simple question, which is, to what extent are employers today relying on the traditional academic transcript, at least as it's formatted in the US, which is much more limited than the HERE or the AEGS in Australia? And to answer that question, we had to do a little bit of sleuthing, because the way our system works is we have a destination list. So you type in the name of where you want to send, you get the organization back, you hit select, and you're good to go. But that destination list is almost entirely populated by academic organizations, by admissions offices, graduate admissions, transfer admissions, undergraduate admissions, because that is clearly the main use of an academic transcript. If you're sending on to an employer or a licensing board, now some are in the destination list, the vast majority are not, you have to go into what we call our out-of-network workflow, which basically means sending by email, because you can send to any email destination, or by sending to print mail, you can type in any postal mail destination. And so we've gone into that data, and we've developed a set of services that basically take the domain name, for example, ey.com, also take the postal addresses. A firm like Ernst & Young has offices across the world. So we recognize that a particular address in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I live, is an Ernst & Young office. Similarly, one in Greensboro or Chapel Hill is an Ernst & Young's office, or in Manhattan is an Ernst & Young office. And we recognize all of the deliveries to this organization, Ernst & Young, and then we can map that to other data sources that tell us Ernst & Young is a financial services firm or an accounting firm or a consulting firm, and go from there. And so with the benefit of that, and a second piece of data, which is when a student requests, we ask them the purpose of their request. Are they sending it for licensing or employment or graduate admissions or transfer admissions? And while not every student provides a purpose, if enough students provide a purpose for a destination, and if we can recognize that destination and the type of organization it is, then we can pretty much infer more broadly and begin to get a pretty good map outside of our structured data of what's happening with at least our sample of universities in the US. And so I'll ask you perhaps to use the chat if you want to guess at what % of academic transcripts are being used for employment. 71% of students say that they want to use them for employment opportunity, and the answer is about 6 to 10%. And it's probably closer to 10% as we continue to tighten the algorithm. So about 1 in 10 transcripts that are sent to it for employment or for licensing. Now that's, in my mind, a little bit higher than I would have expected when you think of what's in an academic transcript and how useful that is to an employer. But we'll get into some patterns behind that in a moment. Now, the rest of it, of course, is for educational opportunities. 75% of students also say that their academic record is relevant for that, of course, and about 80 to 85% are going for that purpose, depending on where the employment comes in. So that leads us to sort of drive to 3 broad conclusions, which is, or ask 3 questions. How do we fully support employers with today's academic record? How do we then engage them to really help them understand what information they want to be able to discover, evaluate, and develop talent? And then the beauty of a digital credential, the beauty of a credential management system is that we can really innovate the record, both in the content as well as in the format. And I think the format matters. So to share a little bit more from our data set, and then I'll hand it over to Rodney, the top industries that academic transcripts in the US go to are kind of interesting, and they have a certain commonality to them. By far, the biggest is education. So if you want to be hired into a K-12 school district as a teacher, as a substitute, as a school leader, if you want to be hired as a tenure track professor, as an adjunct, as a university administrator, not surprisingly, the education system, which is a very large employer, values the academic transcript and collects it. The second is the government. And the government's a little bit tricky because it includes both the armed services and the military. It includes the National Security Agency and the State Department and the bureaucracy. But it also includes, on a county or local level, sheriff's departments, police departments, are very active collectors of academic transcripts because your wages are tied in part in terms of their professional development program to courses completed, particularly in partnership with a local institution. And then also in government, you have the state licensing boards and licensing and certifications in nursing and medicine and accountancy, and all of those fields are active collectors of transcripts as well. The third, fourth, and fifth you can see here. And the thing that they have in common is that they are generally highly regulated industries. So these are industries that have external auditors or regulatory processes, and who, as a result of that, have very well documented hiring and evaluation and certification processes around their people. And that type of checklist mentality often includes verifying or going deeper into an academic transcript. And I think that's an interesting observation to be made. If we can evolve the record to support more than that more narrow context, there's an opportunity to make a bigger impact. A related question that we ask is what are they receiving? And how do we first address that question of aligning better for the academic records that they do receive? The answer is the vast majority of them are getting them by email or paper mail. And that's a tough way to receive it. If you're getting it by email and you're getting hundreds, if not thousands, that's a lot of emails to open, separate files to download, and then move into whatever system you use. And that's not for a lack, and then obviously paper mail is even more so, and that's not for a lack of centralized processing. When you look at the email addresses that firms like JP Morgan and others use, they're quite structured. There are things like campus recruiting or college recruiting or jobs. So it's not for a lack of structure on their end, it's for a lack of engagement and alignment with the technology and the processes of the issuing side, namely the university. There's some interesting industry variation. Over fields that we talked about, the ones that collect a lot, not surprisingly, over 70% of what they're receiving is electronic, so by email, whereas fields like the pharmaceuticals industry and consumer services are still largely receiving paper. A firm like JP Morgan is still largely receiving paper, only 24% electronic. The US Army, less than 10% electronic, as well as the US Navy, less than 10% electronic. There's also some interesting variation by the type of institution. So there are many different ways to think about prestige, and I want to be careful here. We use Barron's as a measure of selectivity in admissions, which I don't think, the degree to which you reject students should be the measure of your prestige and quality. But unfortunately, that is one way in which people look at it. So if we bucket our senders by those who Barron describes as relatively unselective, so non-competitive to competitive, versus those that are very, very selective, you see some differences. So for the firms that are not as selective, they're sending into family services and food products, consumer retail, whereas those that are the most selective institutions, the Cornells and Columbias and Stanfords of the world, they're largely sending into banking, capital markets, financial services. And so we also note that about 45% of deliveries from a college for employment are going in the same state as the college. And that's actually a higher rate than for purposes like graduate admissions. And so it suggests that if you're an institution, really think about your degree programs, think about the kind of industries that your students have a pattern of moving on to. Obviously, think about your local economy, and these are all things that institutions do. And forming those partnerships and creating that ecosystem, that network-based, digitally-based ecosystem for your academic records is going to vary quite meaningfully by type of institution. The flip side is true, that we may want to think about using these data to form bridges into fields and employers where previously your students may not have progressed. So I'm a glass half full type person. 6 to 10%, again, may seem like a little, it may seem like a lot. I think I view it as a lot. If 10% of transcripts are going in their current format, we don't have the HERE, we don't have the AHEG, we don't have a broader record, although we do have some neat innovations coming out of this CLR. If we're already at 10% with a broad, diverse set of types of employers, the logos of which you see just a sample on the screen, then expanding that record, innovating the format, and most importantly, having a deeper conversation, I think, can really increase the value of the record. So our game plan at Parchment is to really work to expand our receiver network to these frequent employers, to these open destinations that historically haven't been included in the destination list and haven't been included in the network view of our sender and receivers, and get them more directly involved using the email and print mail deliveries as a way of, so to speak, lighting up the pathways and opening up the opportunity to engage. Second, we're releasing a very simple and secure third-party request capability, because many of these destinations are employers and background check companies who simply want a verification of the qualification, or at least from a process perspective, they want to request on behalf of the learner instead of leaving it for the learner to do all of the work. And then digital diplomas is something that's growing very fast in the US. A secure Blue Ribbon PDF version of the diploma, but also one that you can post into LinkedIn, post into Facebook, and use as a more active, sort of proactive way of verifying your education and establishing your professional identity. And that's what we talked about in the webinar before, which I would recommend to you and is recorded. And then last but not least, and this is where Rodney comes in, how do we work with our universities who themselves are working with employers to really transform the academic transcript into a more comprehensive learner record? And that term is a term of art increasingly in the US, the CLR, the Comprehensive Learner Record, which will make it hopefully more useful and meaningful and actionable, which then will open up, if we've got that network in place, open up the opportunity for the record to be more impactful. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rodney Thank you for the questions that are in the chat, and I look forward to coming back to them. And Rodney and I are on opposite sides of the United States. He's in North Carolina, I'm in Arizona. So he will verbally cue me when he wants me to advance the slides.
And I'm just glad it's not nearly as early here as it is for you, Matthew.
No problem.
So just a little bit about, you can go ahead and go forward, Matthew. Just a little bit about Elon University. Elon is deeply embedded into engaged learning. So Elon has had what we would traditionally call a co-curricular transcript since 1994. And so whenever I started at Elon, this transcript already existed. And, it was basically a text-based version of a document and repeated a lot of the information that was already stored on the academic transcript. So as I looked at the transcript, we started a discussion about how do we, begin to create more depth with regards to the co-curricular transcript. Elon's 5 experiences that we track: global education, research, leadership, service, and internship. Those 5 things align with KU's high impact practices. So when we started thinking about how do we, deepen those experiences, we rewrote the transcript initially to really look like the academic transcript, and then working with Parchment to send that as one academic document. So students could opt in to receive both their academic transcript and then the co-curricular transcript all with one request. And that helped considerably early on in our developmental endeavors. We did see, like, that first year, when it was initially printed by Student Affairs on campus, when we moved it to the registrar's office and we started, working with the transcript, we saw a significant increase in the number of requests because it was contained all in one system. So we literally went from about 10 to nearly 800 the first year when we combined the systems to request both academic and co-curricular transcript. All of this led to Elon's selection to be part of the ACRO-NASPA Lumina grant that started back in 2014. And the initial, discussion was, to take a look at various models, to create a number of different models out there to find ways to showcase that comprehensive 4-year experience. And so, how do we deepen the level of learning? How do we make information, more available to employers? How do we document, information in a way that's easily legible? A discussion on whether or not the traditional concept of the Carnegie unit is limiting in terms of, education, and whether or not competency-based models might be, a new avenue to showcase the skills that graduates actually have. You can go ahead, Matthew. And then other things would be to, look at, how do we communicate those results with an extended type of transcript. And so initially, what we did, what ACRO and NASPA did was they joined together to select 12 institutions that best, had the opportunity to, create these new transcript extension models. And to be honest, they were really all across the board. They didn't limit the institutions, that put forth ideas. They wanted to really, try to come up with a number of different solutions to the problem of a transcript that really is, something that's difficult to use, and we don't see a lot of employers would say they didn't see a lot of value in that traditional transcript. And so if you go to the next slide, I believe, is the list of institutions. You can see here the list of institutions that were selected to be part of that initial grant. And, really they were all across the board. So for example, Brandman did some really innovative work with badging and transcripting badging. Central Oklahoma did work using a transformative learning theory and model behind the development of its extended transcript. Elon did co-curricular work. IUPUI and University of South Carolina also did co-curricular work. Stanford worked on a certificate and embedding information into an electronic certificate so that you can verify the authenticity of the certificate and then get more information associated with that certificate, such as learning outcomes or competencies. And then you had UMUC that also did competency-based education and using an LMS platform to come up with a competency-based program and then figuring out creative ways to transcript that information. All right, Matthew? So in a year, so they basically gave us 1 year to come up with our idea and put thought into action. And you can imagine Elon's original co-curricular transcript was simply a text-based version of the transcript. So listing it by term, you know, the various experiences, those 5 experiences I mentioned earlier, listed by term, you know, very representative of some of that traditional transcript ideology that, you know, exists for registrars. And so we began to think, how could, you know, and you know, even a conversation early on with Matthew, how do we take text-based information and convert it to something that might be more legible, easy to read, could still be certified by the institutional registrar or a student affairs vice president, but really depth associated with that experience outside of the traditional courses. So as you can see, this is page 1 of the new co-curricular transcript, which we call the Elon Experiential Transcript. And you can see we do a little summary across the top that shows, you know, the number of hours, terms, so on and so forth. And then we give you a timeline so that it breaks down, you know, each year based off of how, you know, those 5 experiences, you know, tracking those 5 experiences by year. And I'll come back to the hyperlinked element in just a moment. Let's go ahead and go to the second page of it. You can see the second page, we actually list the company logo, the number of hours that they actually do in the internships, all the service sites that they do in the lower left-hand corner, research, you know, and you get a bar for presenter, a bar for grant, and a bar for presentation, the leadership positions that the student actually fulfills in the upper right-hand corner, and then we actually mark on a map in the lower right-hand corner all the places the student studies globally over the course of their 4 years. Now, the interesting thing that we've done, you know, we launched this in 2015, and it makes up about a third of our transcript volume when students opt in to receive the you know, secondary transcript. And they can order this transcript independently from the academic transcript to showcase it on social media sites. But interesting thing about it now is, you know, what we've done is we've started to embed learning artifacts into the body of the transcript itself. So, for example, internship, we can now hyperlink to the job description of the internship. Under research, we can hyperlink it to a published paper. The leadership in the upper right-hand corner, you know, the description of the leadership positions that they hold, significant service sites that they visit, and then as far as global education, you know, if they do a writing staff, you know, writing example, you know, and they want to embed a writing example about their global education, or if they want to do, if they've done a video associated with their global education experience, even the competencies associated with the global education experience, we have a lot of flexibility to be able to curate these elements and create the links actually directly in the transcript. So a couple of the things about the transcript, we, you know, are cautious to say we don't want students to simply check off the boxes to earn all 5 experiences. And so when this transcript is created, if a student doesn't have an experience, it suppresses that experience from the transcript and highlights what they have versus what they may have missed, you know, of those 5 experiences. We also don't let students put anything on the transcript. So all of it is tracked and articulated in a way that we are curating the entire academic record for the student instead of having the student upload any information to the transcript itself. Now that gets a little tricky at the end if we're starting to embed additional artifacts, but even those artifacts are cultivated and curated with the help of the student and verified before they actually go on this transcript. So that when we send the transcript, there's a a peace of mind that the institution is putting their name behind these experiences that the student has had in conjunction with the traditional academic courses that they take. So when they send this transcript through Parchment, you have the academic transcript, and then you can combine this co-curricular transcript with it, or you order this transcript, and like Matthew said earlier, the growth of electronic diplomas, you combine this transcript with your electronic diploma, and students are able to market themselves very differently on the social media sites. We've done a couple studies with this transcript. The first study was published in NACE in February, looked at the employer feedback on this transcript, and which was overwhelmingly positive. So employers loved the fact that they could get more information and that the institution was certifying that these students have these experiences. We did the same study with students. Nearly 600 students responded, and same exact results. The students felt that this was great. They have more information to showcase to potential employers and market themselves. They were quick to point out that they want more information than even what we've collected here in the 5 experiences. So employers as well as students were quick to say, hey, this is a great start. Let's get some more information and continue to build upon this. Employers were actually the ones that led us to start embedding information, because employers were the ones that highlighted the fact that they would love to see the internship description as well as the leadership description in the transcript itself. And so that's why we started to actually embed those elements. They actually listed competencies as the third most important thing to embed into the body of an academic record. And so, institutionally, our faculty haven't really started to develop competencies. We certainly have program outcomes, but working with Matthew and his team, we've even started to think of other prototypes on how to blend learning outcomes with the transcript itself for maybe future generations of this type of academic record. You can go ahead and go forward, Matthew. So just a little bit about the transfer of the information. Basically, we store everything in the student system, and we use Ellucian Colleague as our student system. And this just gives you an example. We're storing a line of data for each experience in the system using a saved file and then exporting it to the newly created platform that creates the visual transcript. And that platform is housed at Parchment. So Parchment houses the platform. We upload the file, and it creates a web link and PDF of each individual experiential transcript for the student. Most of these experiences today are all automated, so they get refreshed nightly. So for example, if it's leadership, those come from a system called Campus Labs that we use on campus to track all the leadership experiences. Service is moving to a system called GivePulse that tracks all the service that they do all across the Alamance region. Internship is a course, and so on the academic transcript, we still say internship, but on the co-curricular transcript, we actually would say the name of the entity in which they're doing their internship. Global education, of course, is course-based as well. And then research is also course-based. All right, the next slide. You can see here, this is a snapshot of our colleague system. This is a course that's taught in the fall. It's called Wilderness and Adventure Therapy. And you can see we modified Baseline Colleague, our student system, to track experiential locations on the right-hand side about halfway down. And those experiential locations gives us the ability to indicate all the places in the world that this particular course will visit, and at that point, that's where we're getting the information to track that globally on the map. Next slide. And similarly, here's the section level of a course that shows on the right-hand side, about halfway down, it'll say EET title. And you can see that this student actually did an internship with the Burlington Royals. And so this is individually course-based, but for the most part, you can see with modifications directly to the system, we were able to integrate a lot of the pieces of information that are important for an experiential transcript into existing workflows that already existed in the system itself. So we didn't create a bunch of extra work for people to manage a lot of this information. We simply added pieces here and there in order to deepen a lot of the information that was already being collected for the academic transcript. Next slide. This is a snapshot kind of showing what we teach the students at the very end of their 4-year degree. They receive their experiential transcript and their electronic diploma, and then we show them how to market themselves on the social media sites. And of course, if you go out to a student that has this information, you click on it, it provides a larger version, and then you can mine down the co-curricular transcript to look at some of those additional artifacts that's being collected as a result of embedding new material into the body of the transcript itself. And the next one. And that's it. So I think we have a number of questions at this point.
We do, Rod. Many thanks. This is Rob. I guess having given both of them a chance to think about it, whether we have a couple of colleagues with us who are involved in organisations that are third-party organisations that issue the here in the UK, and it would be helpful if they feel able to just to say a little bit about whether their experience is in any way similar to the experience, Matt, you reported in terms of focus in employers, but above all, I guess, focus in terms of use by other academic bodies, because I think some of that would be confirmed. So this is a plea to Alex and Simone. If they want to say anything from their respective organisations, then you can do. And colleagues may want, in any sense, to unmute their mics and ask some questions. Otherwise, we'll go through some of the ones here. Okay, let's work up then from the questions we've got here. Just looking right at the bottom, one from Alex, who's asking a number of questions really about student engagement, promotion of co-curricular provision, and the extent to which this verification process is more integrated approach, I guess, Rod, okay, is increasing the sense of student engagement. So maybe you can speak to that, and Matt may have some thoughts on that also.
That's a really good question. I'll start with that one, Matthew. So, one of the most important things, and I probably should have mentioned this in the talk, is that we do require students to have what we call 2 experiential learning requirements to be eligible to graduate from the institution. And those are chosen from that list of 5 that are tracked on the co-curricular record. So within the body of their, what we would call their degree audit, they can actually see how those co-curricular experiences are being used to meet their degree requirements also. So those are extremely important to the faculty on campus. We've looked at the data. The average number of experiences at Elon is 9 when you look at the number of experiences that they're having. So students are highly engaged, in these 5 experiences at the institution. We do a good job at the very beginning now to educate them on what the experiential transcript is. They can see it in their system as an unofficial document, the same way that they can see their unofficial transcript. And then going forward, we've started to consider ways to build the experiential transcript into the body of their 4-year planner. So when students start as first-year students, they create a 4-year academic plan where they can actually indicate where they will actually engage in the 5 Elon experiences also, so that they can really build that into a 4-year plan, and then figuring out a way that students can actually see the co-curricular transcript being built at the same time that they're navigating their way through that 4-year plan. And so we are, trying to really, blend all of those elements together to help students, think more holistically about that experience and the engagements they have. And I would say, one of the questions I get asked, what was the student impact? One thing we talk about often on campus is the fact that students, when they see their co-curricular transcript and when they meet with us as seniors to go through and make sure we've captured everything or begin to embed things, the first thing they always say is, I had no idea I did all of this while I was at Elon. And so we've curated this record, and then it's a time for us to, be able to review this, and the students now are reflecting back like, that they had completely forgotten some of the experiences that they had. And so now Elon has started to really be more purposeful in helping the students tell their academic story, tell that journey, use those experiences, from the beginning rather than just showcasing them at the very end. And so I think there's more work to be done there, but that engagement is certainly a product of, engaged learning on campus as a whole.
Thanks very much, Ron. That's really helpful, and it chimes with some of the experience in the UK context, where particularly from the grad intelligence community, the evidence is of student engagement progressively increasing the earlier these concepts and approaches and opportunities for engagement are introduced. So that's really helpful. Thank you for that. Just working our way up, 2 questions that, again, Rodney, you might want to spend a bit of time on. Gillian's asked about how many staff does this take? I'm going to leave you to answer that one. I'm just interested if you can say anything about the emphasis in the transcript that you showed us on the time spent, and how far that coexists with the notion of achievement, because the here has got achievement at its central core. That's so often difficult to get at, but it does imply at least a little bit of evaluation of the experience, as opposed to getting the numbers of hours. So 2 questions. Again, you might both have a go at that, and other people might want to add their 2 pennies in the chat or by unmuting mics. Thanks, colleagues.
Matthew, do you want to start with that? You might have. Matthew, there?
I am sorry. For some reason, the unmute was not being responsive. No, why don't you move ahead? I do want to make a comment, but I think since you're in the thick of it more than I am, you should start.
So I would say for staffing, we didn't increase staffing in the registrar's office. We have a total of 9 staff, including myself, for about 6,700 students. And, I would say that institutionally, though, this is, while the registrar's office may curate this and work with Parchment to distribute the transcript, it definitely takes a village of us to put this together, because each of those individual entities, global education, service, internship, leadership, has its own division on campus. So there is the Carnodal Center of Service Learning that is responsible for articulating the hours and getting those into the system, setting up the service sites, verifying, service of a student, if it's not part of a class and they want to verify, that these hours, they did these hours and they want them on the transcript. So it is that center that goes out and actually verifies with the supervisor that those hours were completed. Same thing for internship, that's a direct work with our Student Professional Development Center to actually put those internships on the transcript itself, but we will verify a non-credit internship. So earlier I said, we have some pretty cool workflows that were set up, that bring the data over to us and into the transcript. But if there is the experience that the student has that it's not course-based or it's not part of that process, then it's up to those individual entities to verify that and get it actually into the system itself. So we do all work together on that piece. Your second question, let's see, about was it student engagement and process? Was that the question?
It's around the idea of the time spent and whether that's being taken as a proxy for the level of achievement, or whether, because achievement in a sense is in the eye of the achiever, if you see what I mean. Part of the notion of constructing narratives, I guess, for some in the UK, including me, would be to help the students differentiate, their key learning, which could come in 10 minutes of a 100-hour experience. Or some people might do 100 hours and never get it. So it's just whether there's a sense in which that kind of debate matters to you, or the key thing is in a sense being able to demonstrate the commitment across the different domains and the length of time people have spent. Just be interested in your perspective on that, really, either of you.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would say depth in being able to articulate those experiences from an engaged learning perspective is the most important component for Elon. So it's not just about doing the experience or certifying the experience, but being able to articulate the value of that experience, the competencies associated with the learned experience itself, being able to talk about those, being able to articulate why you chose a specific internship, or why did you choose to do research in this particular area? How does, the research that you've done, what value do you see, as the outcome, and how will you use those experiences going forward? So there is a lot of work in that area with the faculty, with, looking at each of those individual experiences, the programming surrounding those experiences, and institutionally, everybody has access to the system to be able to help the students articulate that story. So whether it's an academic advisor, a faculty advisor, a career center advisor, the registrar's office, so from day one to the very end of their academic career, we are trying to ask those engaged, thought-provoking questions that allows the students to really think about those experiences and how those experiences have shaped who they are.
What I would build on that, I'd make two comments. One is Rodney presented the list of institutions participating in the CLR initiative, and I think something that's very important is just how diverse they are, from 2-year, what we would call community colleges, up to the most selective universities, small liberal arts colleges, very large institutions, and that's very purposeful. I don't see the United States ever having something analogous to here. We don't have a Ministry of Education. We don't have a JISC. We're just a much more decentralized system. And so you're going to have a variation from those who have really integrated the co-curriculum into their entire way of organizing student life and the student experience and can directly assess and track, to those who may really be looking at it as a way of aggregating self-reported data, where it's simply, the ability to represent what a student says they have done. And I think that's okay. It really is based on the type of institution. And ultimately, it's for the receiver to evaluate and make sense of it. So we're going to see a lot of experimentation, I think, over these next few years. The second point I'd make is that this is about the co-curricular transcript, but really the CLR includes competency-based programs and how that begins to show itself in the academic record, as well as new ways of imagining a transcript. So, do we bring in grade distribution so that you can see achievement in context? Do we bring in keywords associated with courses so you have a deeper understanding of what the content exposure or skills were that were developed. Just as filming a movie is more than just filming a play, a digital academic record can and should be more than just an electronic representation of the same data model we've had forever, presented in textual format. So with hyperlinks, with embedded machine readable data that can go beyond the visual presentation, with the recognition that credentials get used as a searchable database to discover talent, all the way down to a visual record when you're interviewing the candidate sitting in front of you in a more qualitative type discussion. This is a really, really exciting time to be thinking about where academic records can go now that they have finally caught up with other parts of the institution digitally. And, you know, we in many ways are jealous of it here. I know that in the UK, there's a lot of work that people see still needs to happen for the year to be broadly adopted and make an impact. But just getting people on the same page about what a comprehensive record could look like, what the data model is like, you know, that's amazing work that we need to catch up to.
Yeah, we don't want to overplay it here. I mean, here is, in a sense, a recommended implementation. Many institutions have adopted it, but you know, the process of getting all the universities in the UK on the same page has been likened to herding cats. So it may not be as good as we'd like it to be. We've just got time maybe for one question. Steve, do you want to say anything about the question about faculty responses, or should we just leave it as it stands?
I'll leave it as it stands, Rob, because it's going to be a long one.
Okay, right. Maybe it's for another time in another place then.
Yeah.
Right.
Talk about herding cats.
Yeah, this is the start of conversation, which will be good. Some of these will be continued, colleagues, those of you who are coming to Dublin, because Acro and Lumina, who are both being mentioned by Matt and by Rodney, will be present, and we'll be having a session which will connect, I'm sure, to the conversations we'll be having here on at least 2 of the 3 days, one a plenary session on the final day about the CRR and how it connects into A, the digital landscape, and B, how it connects with electronic portfolio building. And one of the things we want to do as we go forward is to look at how these systems connect to, draw data from, and enable richer representations of student achievement. And in that sense, these 2 webinars, this one and the previous one, have given us a real rich insight into work that's going on the other side of the pond, and just really cements the recent love-in we've had between the royal family and an American superstar, shall we say. So can I thank everyone for participation? Can I let you know, confirm that the session's been recorded, and we will make that recording available to everyone who's here and to everyone who signed up and to others who came on the Dublin seminar in the next couple of days, and I'm sure there'll be some further questions that come out of that. Can I thank you both, colleagues, Matthew and Rodney, for your contribution. It's been really helpful, and we hope in the true sense of collaboration that we can do some things which might be useful to you at some point too. So thank you for that. And with that, colleagues, and be a minute over on time according to my clock, I think we're done.
Can I just say, Rob, that the recording may take a couple of days to get out because we're off to Dublin and we need to move the recording from one computer to another.
Okay, so colleagues, if you're looking for it, give us till the end of the week and maybe till the beginning of next week to make it available. We're going to be, with the best one in the world, we're going to be thinking of other things for the next 4 days. Thanks, Steve.
My pleasure. And thank you from me, everybody. Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.